Had he been just some guy online just commenting on things, it wouldn't have gone any further. This would not have been a story if it hadn't been such a prominent person.
Why isn't Johnny playing with you?
Johnny's rude and selfish. He doesn't think of others. He won't take turns. And he always seems to be mad at somebody, always shouting or bossing us around.
People comment online to have a voice. They might not have an audience otherwise, so it gives them power to express their opinions in a way without any social repercussions.
Somebody called me a willfully obstinate and I was like, what? Like, that person seriously has some anger management issues.
We did let him play with us, but you should have seen what happened.
My name is Mike Ryerson, and I'm a photographer and a writer for the Northwest Examiner newspaper in Northwest Portland. It's a community newspaper, but it covers basically news of the area like any other publication in, say, a small town. Well, we had a couple stories done about the newspaper, one regarding a house in the area that I felt had been misrepresented as not of historic value. And some commenters said, well, it's not really worth saving, and that I was crazy. And I happened to notice the guy's name was ForestHeightster. Then we had another story about our publisher, and the same fellow came on again and started making some comments that were very nasty, actually. And one in particular where he mentioned the paper wasn't any good for advertising. He didn't know why people advertised in it, and it was just a rag. And it was great for training your dog, and it was great for birdcage liner. And I thought, what a vicious character we have here, and I wish I knew who it was.
If people did leave comments, they were often tearing each other apart and tearing apart the article in a really negative way that didn't actually add to the discussion, like lots of name calling, lots of like bigotry.
If you're, in Portland, Portland is a pretty liberal city. You'll see a lot of more conservatives voicing their opinion online because it's a safe way to do so. You don't have the repercussions of stating an opinion and having the majority of the city, for instance, go against you.
I started reading some other comments that he'd made on other stories. Finding a couple hundred comments by him, I realized this guy really doesn't like it here.
Whenever we tried to talk about what we were going to do, John interrupted. Wouldn't give any of us a chance to say anything. He thought all our ideas were corny.
So it's not uncommon for somebody, even with an anonymous name online, to be leaking certain personal information. So there still is this maybe subconscious desire for them to know, who am I, or what power do I have? So a lot of times things that will leak will be, they'll leak things about their neighborhood. So you'll kind of know, well, they live in a more elite neighborhood.
I figured he lived in Forest Heights.
Or about their occupation.
Like he worked in commercial real estate.
If they're trying to state something or claim that they have expertise in a certain area, they'll leak something about that.
He had 70 employees under him.
You can assume an anonymous identity or what you perceive as anonymous. It's not necessarily anonymous. And people will say things. They feel empowered to say things that they wouldn't normally say in everyday conversations.
I always thought of it as sort of like a shark pit or like a mob with torches.
He had been on a committee called the Rose Garden Advisory Committee for the mayor. And he said he was one of 32 members that had wasted his time. And I thought, whoa, now I suddenly have this down from 1 million people to 32 people, and maybe I could possibly figure out who this guy is. And then he made some comments about he was from Cleveland, Ohio, from Shaker Heights. And I thought, whoa, what are the chances of all 32 people on that Rose Quarter Advisory Committee being from Shaker Heights, Ohio? I did go through the phone book from that point on and found everyone that lived on the west side. So that cut it down to about half. And then I took all the names of all the remaining people that I had left that lived on the west side. And I Googled Shaker Heights, which he said he lived in Ohio. And I Googled his name with Shaker Heights and came up with Brian Owendoff. So I did email him. I found his work, went to his company's website and found his email address. And I emailed him saying that I would like an apology. And he fired back with he didn't know who I was talking about or what I was talking about. And I thought, well, I think I've got this guy lying through his teeth now. So maybe this is going to be interesting. And I told my boss about it. Now, this guy was the top guy with a top real estate company in the city or the state. He was a prominent person who was active in politics plus business. He hosted the mayor a few days before at a lunch with the leaders for the Portland Business Alliance. Had he not been so active, there may not have been a story here, because this is the same guy who's praising the mayor at a lunch and putting him down on his computer at night.
We don't want to call you children down in front of company or friends, but how can we remind you when we think you are forgetting to be considerate of others?
At that point, my boss said, this is Alan Clausen, said that he wanted to go out to lunch with the guy, so he got a hold of him, and Brian said sure, and they would meet the next day or two. But at that same time, we had given Mr. Owendoff 48 hours to respond to our story, which we had compiled in the meantime. And at that point, he canceled, and he said, you need to find somebody to replace Mr. Ryerson. He's annoying. And sure enough, we get an email where he apologized and said, yes, it was him. So we decided to include that in the story. By Friday afternoon, it was the talk of the real estate business, and it was starting to appear on real estate sites, and it was starting to appear in business magazines and business newspapers. And by about 3 days later, if you Googled his name, you would find 25 pages of Brian Owendoff caught.
People get into a lot of trouble. They have an online life that they feel like they can keep separate.
Well, it was a couple days later, I got an email saying that he had been fired from his job. Our intention was never to take his job away from him. I really, really felt bad about it. And this poor guy, he's just like me, but he did do it, you know. He brought it on himself. You got something to say to me, write me a letter and sign your name to it. Or email me and sign your name to that. But you don't have to use a phony name.
A big part of our paper is our website and our blog, Blogtown. And before 2008, the comments in the community on Blogtown were not so great. So we did 3 big things to improve our comment community. The first one was going after those people who were bad apples, warning them that they would be kicked off. The second way is rewarding good behavior. So our editor started emailing commenters when they left a really good comment. And then the thing that made the biggest difference was actually meeting. We organized events to meet commenters face to face, and we had Blogtown happy hours and Blogtown movie nights